What should somebody who is coming up in their career, who wants to have a successful career in an NGO or in the development sector in any way, what should they know or what should they do differently now that they're getting this disability agenda in terms of understanding is it a priority for them?
Well, I think if I had one message, it would be inclusion is always better than exclusion. Mm-hmm. To include is always better than to exclude. Just it's a life lesson. If you can bring someone else to the table, it's better than keeping them away. We need to ask ourselves over and over again, are we cutting corners when it comes to including those mm-hmm. who have been treated with the most disdain by the culture, by the politics, by the social structures in all of our countries. Now here's the thing. On the one hand, we want all programs that address the needs of families or children or healthcare workers, whatever. We want them all to have dedicated attention and focus on people with intellectual and developmental and physical disabilities. But we also need dedicated effort. We need to think in very specific ways about how a primary healthcare project or mm-hmm. a maternal and child health project or an education project or a employment and training project, how they can include people with disabilities. It will not happen automatically. So we need special attention in addition to general attention, if that makes sense.
Which could include special money, right? I mean,
it will have to include special money. And the good news here is that I think when people with disabilities are included, the whole culture gets better quickly. I mean, you can see this in workplaces. Ask any employer who's hired a person with an intellectual disability, they'll say, my goodness, our workplace has gotten better. Ask any school that's really understood and mastered inclusion, they'll say the whole school is a better place. But the bad news is up front there's cost, and there's attention needed, and there's professional development needed, and there's real attention needed to how do we overcome the obstacles we've created to the inclusion of people with disabilities.
Because there's a big movement in the global development community, understandably, for value for money, right? Voters in many countries are saying, where is our aid dollar going? What's the most effective place? You see people funding malaria bed nets because they can affect the most number of people for the least amount. Right. In a way, this agenda around helping those people who are living with disabilities runs counter to that, in a sense, unless you've got the data, unless we're at a point where we can kind of make that case.
Right.
How do you feel we are in that, in that debate?
Well, we don't have the data. I mean, the data doesn't exist in almost any country. The disaggregated data around health status, around educational status, around life's quality of life, we just don't have it. Mm-hmm. We don't have it almost anywhere. When you don't have data, it's hard to design programs because it's hard to evaluate them. It's hard to identify what they should be doing. And when you don't have programs, you don't have an interest in the population, and it's a vicious cycle. So we need data. And we need to disaggregate this data because the life of a person who's lost a limb through an accident, who has a disability, is completely different than the life of a person who has Down syndrome from birth. I mean, mm-hmm. they both are lumped in the idea of disability, but their issues are wildly divergent and in some ways have nothing in common. So we need data, and we need disaggregated data. But go back to the point you made, which is we want data so that we can measure results, so that we can have efficiency, so that we can get change. If that's the end of the equation, our people are unlikely to be a priority. We all need to be clear on managing our resources. I get that. But I think if we communicate to our donor communities, our governments, our big corporate donors, the power, the soul power, if you will, mm-hmm. of those same gifts being given to a child with Down syndrome or a young boy or girl with autism, or to an adult who has a developmental disability, that young man entering the workforce, the transformative power for him and for all of us in our rebirth of hope, if you will, mm-hmm. in our recommitment to the goodness of every human life, that gift is also got value. Harder to quantify, but important in the development, I think, horizon.